assembling a squad of weirdos. That's a thing.
It's like lifelong journey. It's like, I don't think this is going to be like a next year or 2 years from now
Right.
situation. I think it's like people are developing their superpower. I think like,
Right.
like I would really want to know, like, for example, her specialty is bones and scars.
Wow.
Like,
That's specific.
yeah, and it's because she would do a lot of different things on a person depending what it is. And then like they're just specific things that are just like actually real healing results.
Huh.
And she was like, "Well, I guess that's a thing." And so that's what I
Interesting.
mean. I wonder like people actually when they like cultivate
Yeah.
enough of it, they'll find one thing
That
or a
resonates. Yeah.
couple things that are just like kind of reliable. Because I actually think there's a podcast that Dr. K did that is about like Ayurveda.
Okay.
And it's like a really, really well articulated thesis from the Western lens. Ayurveda is known as like precision medicine
Okay.
in a sense of instead of looking at the population level and trying to extract what works for the population and then designing medicine and like modalities that way, it is
Oh,
actually they look at the one individual and they've developed a lot of tools for individuals. However, the medical research of Ayurveda is known to be very bad. And so he's
oh,
like, actually, what is really required is more rigor, research rigor that respects the fundamental individual based healing and essentially track outcomes, but on an
I
individual
see.
level, right?
Which is harder statistically based on how controlled trials are done,
Yeah.
usually at a population or sample group.
Yeah, but he's like, if there is actually something to the medicine, which he
Okay.
does, because he's seen like lepers walk, right? Like
Wow.
after working on Ayurveda, that he's like, clearly there is something here. It's just that we haven't been able to articulate the value of it because
Hmm.
our instruments are not appropriate. And so what I'm saying is like, I feel like people who are energetic medicine
Hmm.
people, like I want to first figure out what my repeatable measure
Hmm.
is. I don't expect myself to be good at everything, I don't think. But I think having that one
Hmm.
discipline then becomes like real demonstrable,
Yeah,
like you're like a walking evidence of this thing, which I think is more serving than like
that
anything,
makes sense.
But yeah, anyway, I do.
Well, can I
Yeah.
ask questions? I guess I'm curious, how would you know what that is? Like, do you have to apply yourself first to find out what that is?
It's like all scientific progress is just like random walks, right? And discoveries.
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah.
For both of our cases, I think. I guess, like, yeah, what I'm learning is I think some of this energetic stuff is more experiential and felt.
Mhm.
So the results may and the insights and like how to do the random walk may come from experiences and felt senses through the practice and the application rather than like proactively looking ahead and thinking like is left or right better. It's like, well, I might kind of need to experience both
Yeah,
and
yeah,
pretty
yeah, for
quickly
sure. It's
feel
like
the
evidence
result.
based, like in an
Yeah,
experiential way. Yeah, I agree.
that feels necessary.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which is why I think that, like, as you were talking, I was like, "Oh, I think the opportunity cost of not doing this work, like carving out time to do it,
Hmm.
is not being able to figure that out."
Yes, yeah, yeah, and just
Yeah.
losing it completely.
Yeah. Or just not
Yeah,
having the time to do it.
yeah. I do think there's also like I wonder, like we talked about a little before, right? Like if the world is changing at a rapid pace, good and bad, and there's
Mhm.
a bunch of like chaos, I tend to think that things tend to balance themselves out. So if you have more instability or chaos rising in the world, then there's some sort of like positive things rising to offset it as well, which is interesting to then think about like more people waking up spiritually slash energetically slash just healing themselves or helping to heal others. If that is actually part of like the thing that's balancing out any chaos in the world. And to
Mhm.
some extent, there's like a responsibility where like if you feel some of that coming through for you or friends or whatnot, then
Mhm.
you're kind of like need to continue to be a part of that process. And that's what keeps it in balance.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then it's actually like quite a big disservice to the collective.
Interesting. This reminds me of a very similar thought, which is people who are currently struggling with finding a job
Okay.
or have been let go because of like
Yeah.
reasons.
AI.
And the like, I don't know, n equals three experiences that I've heard so
Uh huh.
far is that people are like, well, the job market's really bad. It feels really like hopeless. And
Hmm.
the chances are low that people are doubling down on things that make them happy like,
Oh,
going back to doing art or, like,
yeah.
content creation and, like
Oh, that's really interesting.
yeah, and it's like a orientation of, like, well, things are screwed anyway, and therefore, I should just do things that I
Right.
enjoy.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like a different roundabout way to rediscover like the things that make us human outside of work
Yeah.
and a reason to double down on that through work being less appealing slash applicable.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like, yeah, I feel like there's like a force that's forcing people to change their
Yeah.
identity to work, you know?
Yeah.
And
Their relationship to work.
yeah, relationship to
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the identity of work. But yeah.
Yeah. That tracks for me.
Yeah.
That seems to
I
make
mean, that
sense.
seems positive in all the darkness.
Yeah. That seems like a good thing for the world.
Yeah. So what was the thing that you wanted to, what was the like the Christopher?
Oh yeah, so I went down this rabbit hole before I went to Peru.
Uh-huh.
Just kind of randomly. I forget how I got here. So
Mhm.
this is essentially like this architect who I think was a professor at Berkeley. He lived from the 30s to I want to say I guess to the early 2020s. He has a super interesting story. His name is Christopher Alexander, and he starts as an architect, but I think where he ends up is very philosophical and almost spiritual.
Okay.
So that's why it's been an interesting way of considering how spirituality and like real world things are bridged. And he kind of got there from starting from the real world, physically, like literally buildings. And I think there's lessons from that that are applied today already and could be applied moving forward. But essentially, he started with some work that was early, I think, in the 60s called A City is Not a Tree, which was him talking about how you can't organize a city or a village through a series of consecutive decisions, meaning you make one choice and then from there it forks and you make another choice. Instead, he thinks it's much more interwoven, where if you put a bench in a park or near a church, that's going to affect everything around it. And it's consistently like self-refining. So it's kind of like a lattice, semi-lattice type of network.
Mm-hmm.
So he does that. And then based on that, some people ask him to design a village ground up in, or a town ground up in India, I believe. And he looks at it and he's like, I am not equipped to solve this problem, which is
Mm-hmm.
kudos for like taking a step back and being like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't do
Mm-hmm.
this. That then leads him to go on like, I think a 12, 17-year quest to write one of his masterpieces called the pattern language, which is basically he comes down and says all great buildings, all great communities are built with some number of patterns. For example, an alcove, a porch. This is how these things are done, and this is how they're used in the construct of everything else. So this is how we can build the great things, kind of systematically bottom up. This becomes super relevant later because people start applying it in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Engineering design patterns is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a big application of it. The irony of it is like as tech starts to embrace it, computer science pioneers learn a lot from him because architecture for buildings, architecture for technology. Actual architects that try to use his stuff, he makes beautiful buildings. Architects that use it kind of make very mediocre kind of stuff. So that then leads him to be like, all right, well, the design, like the patterns are there, we can apply them. Why aren't people able to apply them? Like, what's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes super deep, I think, spends 27 years like researching this. And he realizes that like while things are put together structurally, they lack soul or beauty. And then it's like, well, how can I teach people soul or beauty?
Mm-hmm.
And he starts looking to nature. And he's like, that's kind of the ultimate guide of all these things,
Mm-hmm.
and does a bunch of work and ultimately writes what's called The Nature of Order, which is like his magnum opus 4-volume book about a variety of ways of how beauty and soul take
Mm-hmm.
shape in nature today and how that can be applied in architecture or buildings. One example of it is like System A versus System B, where he talks about System B is like, here's a blueprint, it's predetermined, we're going to do it. System A is kind of like iterative software development these days, where you're going to continue to make adjustments and refine it based on the feeling of it as you're going through it. So we're going to make a room, we're going to see how it feels, we're going to adjust it and like keep doing it that way. That's is kind of where he landed, and that was kind of the essence of his work. And architects study him in school now, and people kind of do continuous work on everything he's pioneered. But to me, it was really interesting because I kind of stumbled on a pattern language, the design work stuff, and I was like, oh, it's interesting that you can just deconstruct something that's so human of like where you live into these patterns. And then I realized that hey, this was actually the foundation for a lot of engineering design patterns. And then it got me thinking of like, where could this go moving forward? And it does make me think that around how we approach technology today, there's things to be learned from the nature of order and applying more of this like feeling-based, soul-driven ways to do technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that iterative stuff may be possible for the first time with generative AI. So I think that's an interesting like area moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more broadly, there is just an element for like, can we embrace a more human and like natural element in what we create as humans and then kind of be a little more holistic beyond just predetermined kind of purely, how do I put it, rational, pragmatic approaches to some of these things. So that was just like the rabbit hole I went down on, and I'm going to try to learn a little more about it and see if I can weave it into what I do. But I think that was just a fascinating story and a fascinating guy. There's some good YouTube videos and pretty long like thesis pieces about this stuff out there as well.
That's fascinating. I think like if you were trying to apply some of the pattern language into your UX does he have like a general guiding principles around how to think about it? Or is it like much more prescriptive in terms of like, yeah, like does he have like just general principles of how you would do it?
That's a good question. I think so. From a pattern language, he had this starring system where like
Mhm.
0, 1, or 2 stars of like how prevalent and important a particular pattern is. So I think that's an application where you could think through like what are the most essential pieces. For example, like an input mechanism, like, oh, it should be very easy to provide an input, or like the number of clicks someone takes in UX, like
Mhm.
let's reduce that to a minimum.
Mm.
But certain cases, maybe you want to introduce friction. So like
Mhm.
maybe friction is a different pattern. So I think there's some piece there. I think part of it from design now, from a pattern language, was like there wasn't like a manifesto for how to do this. And I think that's where nature of order comes in, which I need to read next, which I think is maybe where I was describing, for example, that system A versus system B stuff, where you actually do it iteratively based on feeling, which feels very natural for like product, especially at this pace that you can do product now with some of these coding tools. So that's kind of where I shake out on it. I do want to see if there's like more direct lessons that could be mapped out, which is an
Mhm.
interesting question. So
And you
more
think
next time.
yeah, for sure. And like, okay, I have like two more
Oh,
questions.
of course. Yeah, let's
One
jam.
is for the you believe that AI can help adopt more of it because of the
Mm,
flexibility in the way that we can manipulate the UI, or are there specific things that you see in the way that the development of technology is going that
yeah.
enables it?
Great question. I guess first of all, a little bit of both in that right now, because we're able to develop things more quickly and, there's all this talk about like taste and it's like taste, like the final frontier of like human development or
Mhm.
like humans in the development of software. I think that kind of maps to what he's describing where we have all the pieces. We understand code and system architecture and we understand how to put these things together. What's missing is kind of like what is the beauty, what is the soul, what is the taste? And now, as we're able to put these pieces together in various combinations more quickly and iterate through them, I think that's where AI comes into play, where we're able to actually just like hone in on the feeling and
Mhm.
kind of maybe start to do software in a way that's very like feeling first. I think
Interesting.
that would be a very powerful thing.
I see.
And then secondarily, we're like kind of the same way that he empowered a bunch of people with these patterns for architecture. And then a lot of them have been applied in engineering design patterns.
Mhm.
Now, like they're out there.
Mhm.
And with AI, I think a lot of people have access to them.
Mhm.
So we may have just like more shots on goal, more
Mhm.
people trying new ways of doing technology that's more human
Mhm.
first, which I think is going to be interesting as well.
Interesting. So definitions, what is like when he's saying that something is missing soul or yeah, just like what is soul to you?
That's a good question. Very good question. I think the way I would define it for myself in the construct of this conversation or this topic is like a high level of consciousness in the present moment.
Wow.
Meaning, if you have a room or an environment that's set up with all the patterns and you're still kind of like about it, it's just not going to feel right.
Mhm.
Whereas when there's some sort of beauty or soul or like
Mhm.
felt experience to it, you're really going to be like present there. And you
Mhm.
may feel it in certain spaces versus other spaces. And I think that's where like we sometimes talk about things being overly corporate or sterile versus
Mhm.
something kind of feeling right or like feeling inviting. I
Mhm.
think that's really what we're getting to. It's that element of like how present and like how alive our consciousness is in the moment. I think
Mhm.
that's probably what I'd point to.
Interesting. Wow. So it's essentially like aliveness.
Aliveness is, I think, a good word. I think he uses aliveness at some point as well, which is what got him to nature, actually. You went from like these buildings don't have aliveness. What has aliveness? It's nature. And then kind of went from there. I would look at it as like the amount and feeling of consciousness in the present moment. I think Christopher Alexander similarly kind of look at it as aliveness, meaning he would look at these buildings and they have all the pieces, but something about them felt off and like
Mhm.
there's no life in it, which then took him to look at nature,
Mhm.
which is like, wait, the pieces kind of show up similarly and something else is there, be it like the patterns that are fragmenting or fractaling through like leaves or be it something else that really feels full of life,
Mm.
which I think is like his definition of aliveness. And in my case, again, more broadly, just the level of like consciousness and fullness in the moment.
I see. And you think that humans are intrinsically attracted to aliveness as a
Yes,
language?
I think so. I think
Yeah,
we're
I
just
think so too.
attracted to aliveness and consciousness is just like being here and it just like feels good.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes we can't even describe it. This was actually really interesting as well. I think as he did this work, you're reminding me of it. He would try to understand what people prefer, A or B, right? And he would show them two pictures of a building or two pictures of a park or whatever it might be. And this was fascinating because when you ask someone like, what do you like more? Or what do you think is better? That's inherently super coded. And you may think socially like, I've been taught that this is better, or I should say that this is better. And he needed to get outside of that to find these underlying qualities. So what he started to ask is kind of woo, actually, especially for the time, where he was like, which of these do you think is a better representation of your true self?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? It's like a park bench and a park bench. Like, what do you
Mhm.
mean is like my true self? But like, and he'd do all this coaching, get them past like that thing.
Yeah.
But once they get past that block, that's when he found like the pattern that was people were pointing to was like something that they felt more alive in.
Interesting. Do you think that something that is sterile or incorporate could be a version of someone's true self?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
For
think
some
that
people.
yeah, so that in some ways it is not necessarily like the feeling like aliveness is not necessarily the end goal.
Hmm.
I'm just trying to yeah, I think it's just so fascinating what you're bringing up in terms of is the true self something that's always more like the way that you said that there's like an environment that actually cultivates
Yeah.
higher sense of presence
Yeah.
is it definitely hit something for me in terms of like
Mm.
that feels like a beautiful definition of aliveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do wonder, it's like, does that mean that corporations are always more deadening than
That's a good question.
Probably, probably.
Perhaps. And
Yeah.
we could think about like the whole idea of like what the 2010s where like tech offices started to have like bean bags and colors and posters and like
Yeah.
micro kitchens. And some of that is like maybe overdone, but some of that I did think helped people like bring their true self to work or bring up more of it,
Yeah.
which maybe cultivated that.
That's fascinating.
Probably more to be done there, to be honest. Like this could probably have a number of research studies out there. So hit
So
us
what
with them grants.
so what would you do with his books? Would you like try to like load them up? Like, do you think that
Yeah.
like the process is that you would load them up onto like a Claude project and then try to like like deduce some of the principles and then try to apply into the product design? Or do you
Yeah.
think it's more just like you would internalize a lot of the things that he's thinking about and then try to do it? Like, do you
It's a
think
good
AI could
question.
use his principles to generate new designs?
Possibly, right? Because like you think about like the frontier labs and their science departments or Google's like science work where they're using LLMs and various models to like simulate new scientific breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Why not do that in more humanitarian and social studies types of
Yeah.
applications or in architecture?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder that if humans actually become the kind of like sole proprietor of taste
Yeah.
custodian of taste, then like wouldn't it be cool to like have it present 20 different
Yeah.
versions, or would it be that we would actually still be fundamentally creating those versions because the inspiration comes from that? Like I think
Hmm.
that's like kind of tied to a lot of ideas of like our
Yeah.
human agency and our ability to create. Is it tied to the craft or is it more about curation and choice? Like, do we need to be the ones who are like actually producing the art in order
Right.
to make the art?
I think you're hitting on a different,
Like, completely
which is
point, yeah.
interesting. I thought about a little bit of like one of my qualms with AI right now for art is that it takes out the journey and gets you to the destination too quickly. And I think a lot of the feeling and aliveness of art
Mhm.
happens in the journey where like if I run out of red, I guess I'm going to use like blue for this. And oh, that actually is bringing up something different for me. And then that that transposes itself in the art and that like that feeling comes across and various other examples like that. With AI, I can type in a prompt and get a bunch of images or get chapters, get entire books. And because there's not this like continued iterative like feeling of me being in it, I'm not really like channeling something through myself. Like,
Mhm.
and I think there's less art as a result of that. And I have less attachment to the result. Like
Mhm.
I'm down to just do another version almost immediately. So with that, to what you're bringing up before, like I do think there's some evolution with how we use some of these tools where if AI is able to create a bunch of versions for us and we're able to, in a flow state, kind of continue to channel our choice and our taste, then that may be a better creative experience that ends
Interesting.
up being really powerful.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're kind of utilizing the core principles of the book to say that actually the instrument of art creation will change because we will have so many different shots at creating these tools. So it's more like a ability to have more feeling-based
Hmm.
engineering as like toolkits to generate
Right.
engineering from feelings, which is kind of vibe coding in a way, but
In a way,
still like
yeah.
text-based.
Tap into the vibes.
But I think to your point about like AI that generates art, it's like still very limiting in terms of the
Hmm.
instruments available. It's mostly a chat box, and that we could probably develop more tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to get very tangible, I think, first of all, for myself personally, I think I'd probably load this as an audiobook and listen to it like 2x speed while hiking or something, and
Yeah.
then try to do some of this hands on tech stuff.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to say, here's how this played out in architecture. Start
Mhm.
with his first books and kind of go through from pattern language to a nature of order, and then bring in the pieces where he would use human input,
Mhm.
like the questions he would ask people and how he would distill that, and then try to use that as a template for a new AI workflow for various things of like, hey, now we're trying to apply this for architecture again, mirror it. Okay, give me a bunch of like possible combinations of patterns. Let's
Mhm.
get human input. And from that, see if we get to the similar results.
Mhm.
And then start to apply it to other disciplines of like, let's try to do this for a painting. Like we understand the patterns of a painting, we understand texture, we understand light, whatever it might be. Let's put together some things and then survey the user, like real time test the user, like what feels more alive, see what comes up. You can do that for fashion, for music, for
Mhm.
code,
Wait,
etc.
just to be clear, the output is not the painting itself, but rather the
Exactly.
instrument for
Yeah,
painting.
exactly. So based on
Yeah,
what happened for what Christopher Alexander did for architecture, creating a similar tool to do the same thing for architecture and then do it for a bunch of other fields
I see.
as a way of almost like refining and training human taste.
So what you're saying is like actually we need new CAD software
Yes,
that's
potentially.
enabled by AI by taking the actual fundamentals of
Yeah.
design and then iterate with AI with a lot of different versions of it
Yeah.
and then have people give us their feedback on
Right.
taste.
Which I think would then be really interesting in terms of democratizing taste as well, access to this. Because if you think about one of the main things of like YouTube that I think was great is like the amount of democratization of like a voice that it provided for people. And all of a sudden we get to see how like people in Tibet like live and what they do, or like how someone is like doing a farm-based culture, or someone's speaking on like quantum physics, like whatever it might be, we have access to all that. If you now have, hey, anybody can create architecture or like room layouts or whatever it might be, we might come up with very new tasteful things that we weren't able to kind of infer
Mhm.
ourselves based on the limitations of who had access to those tools before.
Mhm.
I think that is probably what it looks like to really democratize some of these things to a very human and personal way,
I see.
which I think could be really interesting for the modalities that we can create within.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically, I'm thinking. I mean, like this is such a kind of groundbreaking idea, actually, on some level. I just wanted to first like acknowledge that, in the sense that like people are very worried about AI centralizing a lot of its power to
Hmm.
different people, but the way to decentralize it actually is to create tools that enable
More
anybody
people to do.
to create it. Questions on like
Hmm.
pragmatic question,
Yeah.
which is currently the reason why architecture is like really hard to do is because you have to get certified to
Hmm.
understand like I don't speak
I
architecture
get what you
language, but
mean.
like, the actual standards, like making sure that the
Hmm.
beams are not going to fall off and that like it's structurally sound and that there are a bunch of like boards that are complete like safety
Hmm.
protocols. So it sounds like it would be a great tool for people to prototype to
Right.
get to like new ideas. I guess the question I have is like, would all the other counterparts to technology, like the safety
Hmm.
board and all these other certifications that like reinforce the like bare standard
Yeah.
of that space, would also have to like kind of change with the times? And could they change with the
That's a good
times?
question.
And like I wonder if there are specific use cases where like the prototyping actually has like lower regulations, like
Right.
coding, for example.
Hmm.
Like engineering is going through a huge change right now because there
Yep.
really isn't any regulation around or any kind of like standard protocol.
It's a good question. I guess what are my 2 cents on it right away? I think I feel like what you're bringing up is an incredible point of like bringing something to the real world has a bunch of factors involved beyond just the technology,
Mm.
and we can't make light of those, and those have to be done well. I think if the technology starts to evolve quickly towards something like this, I feel like it will create a pressure on those other factors that either, hey, they'll have to adjust and people will find ways to improve, the engineering review and the safety review and like actually keep up with it. Or we may end up having disruption, which I think like for what's an interesting example. I think Airbnb was an interesting example where one of the first times it was like tech went from resell software for an industry, say
Mhm.
hospitality, to hey, tech can actually provide hospitality to some extent now. Debatable because they're not building the initial buildings or whatnot, but as an example, you can just try to imagine now there may be room for some of these companies to form that, hey, we're going to do the tech part, but we're also going to in-house the safety, the standards, clinical review, whatever is necessary to make sure we can provide a real world finished product of this that meets the bar as well. So
Mhm.
that'll be interesting. I
Yeah.
feel like there's probably a lot of room towards that in like robotics and manufacturing automation right
Hmm.
now too.
Which are the three top industries do you think that this would be most ready for?
Most ready for?
Yeah, readiness
Ooh.
defined by people's general openness to technology, the
Mm.
desire and appetite for rapid prototyping to democratize
Mhm.
the availability of the art form. And I don't know, cost-based concerns, like it would be fundamentally lower the cost of doing
Yeah,
something.
it's a good question.
Curious what would you bet on? They're like very high level. We like
Yeah.
don't have to get
I
into it.
think one of the earliest that we're already seeing is music, and I think there's probably a lot more to do there. Like
Mhm,
Suno's done let a bunch of people make music that couldn't make music before,
mhm,
but I think it's still like that feeling and iteration part isn't as good as it could be.
mhm,
Like if we think about everything that happened with like GarageBand and the ability to create just from a laptop, I think
mhm.
that created a bunch of new musicians.
Yeah, like Spice, I think just like
Yeah.
create a lot of libraries for people. But yeah, I okay, so music is
I think
definitely
music's
one.
up
Yeah.
there, and I think it has enough economic interest in it that like makes sense to do.
I
Uh,
actually think I'm betting on animation.
Animation, yeah,
Yeah, I think
storytelling.
so yeah, storytelling, but I think like maybe live actions, like people don't seem to love like slop made
Mm.
generated movies, but animation is like we can probably increase like the
I could see that, yeah,
fidelity.
yeah, yeah.
And I wonder like if there is the ability for everybody to generate their own film.
Right,
Uh, I I absolutely think people would watch it. Like there's like a huge appetite. And so like creating tools to make animation like
yeah,
high quality and make it better.
I could see that.
Yeah.
That feels good. I guess all of these are still purely digital. I wonder if there's, like, anything that starts to take physical shape too that we could
My
think about.
personal my
Yeah.
personal obsession is,
Ooh,
like, the human the human engineering,
okay.
developmental engineering. It's like right now
Tell us
everyone
more.
is well, I don't know, I'm just, like, completely I'm not prepared for this
Yeah, me I
conversation.
mean, neither was I. We're here.
I think that currently it's mostly, mostly therapists, right, who are able
Mm,
to help someone, like, debug their
yeah.
mind. To your point, I think that there are like developmental engineering templates. Like there are probably
Mhm,
canonical books about how to help someone's psyche, whether it's like in the psychotherapy space or like more
mhm.
CBT or more energetic, like there are many different modalities. You could pretty much say like, okay, well, you can manufacture not like AI therapy, but like AI creating new tools for
Right.
therapists or something. Like, but this is a space that I've always been.
That's interesting. It
Like,
kinda
what would that look like? I don't even know.
well, it kinda reminds me of something that I worked on in the past, and I have to be careful about how I speak about this, but digital therapy, that's self-paced, right? Where you could deliver therapy for insomnia or anxiety or depression or whatever.
Hmm.
Cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of the most applied of this, and that's been around from the 60s and 70s. Like, it
Hmm.
really hasn't changed much. But you could get to a point where you deconstruct, and we kind of did this at a past company I worked at. You could deconstruct a application of therapy to the underlying primitives that you need to deliver to a person. So you need to help like understand them, evaluate them, give them the techniques to use, and then help them use it on a regular basis and apply it on a regular basis while you then measure them and kind of see results and progress, tailoring along the way as needed. What's interesting with that model then is you could also start to offer those primitives to reconstruct them in various ways. So maybe we treat depression and we use some things that we use to treat anxiety or insomnia, et cetera. That's
Hmm.
so far everything I've worked on. Interesting possible future based on what you're describing is like if you take the primitives of human care of various kinds, be it therapeutic, coaching, whatever it might be, and then open that up as patterns or tools for anyone to apply. Potentially people are able to combine them and deliver to others. You get into like coaching and certification stuff and safety, which becomes pretty important.
Hmm.
But I think it'll be an interesting way for anybody to be of help to another human based on something that they themselves have experienced. Even just like, hey, I'm going to create a micro session about how to navigate career transition or breakups or whatever it might be. And then based on that, everyone's kind of able to provide human care.
That's so fascinating. I think that if there wasn't a possibility where someone could easily, create like a 20-step class, because now content creation is fairly easy. There's some sort of QA involved,
Hmm.
and that it could create a community around that's very specific
Right.
interiority challenge that they've dealt with. Like it's kind of like a wisdom share sort of situation.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I'm like obviously into. But yeah, I'm not betting on it. I'm saying that that's probably hard to
Yeah.
do, but I am like that's like a future that we want.
I like that feature.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Is that a wrap?
Yeah, I think so.
Sweet. That's the
Okay,
episode.
cool.